Good morning. Nice to see you all here this morning, and I think there might be some people downstairs, so good morning to you and those of you on Zoom as well. I'm going to be giving a talk this morning titled Living in Joy. And what I wanted to do was share with you a verse from the Dhammapada that I think speaks to us today. And first, I'll just talk about that verse, and then I'll kind of talk a little bit about it afterwards. But I say that that verse from the Dhammapada speaks to us today, but the Dhammapada is a collection of teachings that are purportedly the words of the Buddha. There's a lot of teachings in Buddhism where they don't even purport that it's from the Buddha, they're just Buddhist teachings. And then there are some Buddhist teachings that purport to be from the Buddha, but with a wink. It's just the genre. So they say, well, Buddha said this, but everybody knows Buddha didn't really say what they're saying, except in spirit, perhaps. But the Dhammapada is a collection of verses that are attributed to the Buddha. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it does mean that the teachings possibly go back 2,500 years. And I just want to remind you that the Buddha was offering this teaching 2,500 years ago. So this isn't anything new. And I think looking at this teaching can help reveal something about human nature. And again, like I said, very apt for the times. It's verse 197 of the Dhammapada. And the Buddha says, "Let us live in joy, never hating those who hate us. Let us live in freedom, without hatred, even among those who hate." That's the verse. Simple. I really like it, but it's something we need to kind of look at a little bit, what it is that the Buddha is pointing out to us. So the first thing I want to do is look at that word joy. The Buddha says, let us live in joy. And joy is English translation of the Pali and Sanskrit words sukha, which is usually translated into English as happiness. But what I want to stress is that the joy or happiness that the Buddha is talking about here is not our traditional or conventional ways of thinking of joy or happiness. And I'm guessing the way we think of joy and happiness, usually it's a feeling that we have, right? This is a particular feeling that we have, and it might be a good one. In fact, I'm thinking for most people, feeling joy or happiness is a good one, right? It's a good feeling. And you can maybe even describe it to some degree. This is what it feels like when I feel joy or when I feel happiness. And there's something else that we know about that joy or happiness. We know it's not going to last. We know that. We know that it's not going to last. And that is so deep-rooted in us, right? That our conventional idea of joy and happiness does not last. That I came across an article online recently that kind of caught my eye, because this article cited a study. It was looking at people working together, and it cited a study that showed that workers were negatively affected by coworkers who were always upbeat and cheerful. And I guess it actually has a term. It's called toxic positivity. But what this study did is it kind of looked at, why do workers feel that way? And the reason why is that the coworkers said, we know that you can't always be happy. We know that, right? So there's something inauthentic in somebody who's always happy. Sometimes life sucks, right? So sometimes you're just not happy. So that's our conventional sense of joy or happiness, right? We know it doesn't last, but the Buddha, the joy the Buddha is talking about is not dependent on circumstances like our usual sense of joy or happiness. There we're thinking, we're in the middle of the thick of it, whatever term you use to describe that, right? If you're in the middle of that, you might not be so joyful or so happy. But this joy the Buddha is talking about is not dependent on circumstances. Sukha, that word, again, that Pali Sanskrit word that's translated as joy or happiness, sukha is the opposite of dukkha. And dukkha is a word that many of us are probably familiar with. Dukkha is Buddha's first noble truth. There is dukkha, which is often translated as suffering. But we can think of it perhaps a bit more accurately as this deep-rooted sense of unease, this deep-rooted restlessness, this deep-rooted sense of instability. And those qualities, uneasiness, restlessness, instability, they're actually found in our conventional ideas of joy and happiness, aren't they? Because we know it's not going to last. We know it's not going to last, so we can't depend on it. But if we see sukha as the opposite of, or I would say a better way to put it is the release from dukkha, the negation of dukkha, where dukkha is not there, sukha is ease, restfulness, stability. So again, dukkha, uneasiness, restlessness, instability, sukha, ease, restfulness, stability. And as such, it's not subject to circumstances. Because if it was, then it would be unstable, which would cause us some uneasiness, which would make us restless. The joy the Buddha is talking about is an abiding joy. So with that in mind, then I wanted to look at some English definitions of the English words that we use to kind of get us a clearer sense of what this joy is that the Buddha is talking about in this verse. So joy or happiness. There's one definition of happy that I always like to use when I'm talking about sukha, and that is notably fitting, effective, or well adapted, right? So it really fits. That's happy. That's happy. We might think that's not happy, but that's happy. It fits, right? There's no overlapping. It's just part of it. And as such, it's effective. It's well adapted to the situation. The synonym that the dictionary gives me is felicitous, which I really like that word felicitous, and people don't use it often enough. At least I don't hear people using it. So I thought, wow, what is felicitous? I'm going to look that up. And it means very well suited. So there's that aspect of happy. Very well suited or expressed, apt. But it also means pleasant or delightful. And I think those two go hand in hand. That aptness and that delightfulness, they go hand in hand. So another definition of happy is enjoying or characterized by well-being and contentment. So we think about that happy, that's notably fitting, effective, well-adapted, felicitous. That happiness is enjoying or characterized by well-being and contentment. We're not discontented. We're not unhappy with what's going on. We don't have a sense of being threatened. Right? That instability is not there. And that points us to joy. And joy means a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. But it comes from the Latin word rejoice. And rejoice, to me, gives this idea of happiness a slightly different dimension. It means to feel or show great joy or delight. Cause joy to. Right? So to feel or show great joy or delight, cause joy to. So when we're not at odds with what's showing up, when we're well suited to what's showing up, when we fit into what's showing up, then this sense of well-being and contentment shows up. There's a feeling of pleasant and delightfulness that shows up. That's that joy. And that joy causes us to show great joy or delight. Not in any particular way. It doesn't mean you start throwing flower petals around or whatever. You can tell when somebody's radiating that, and that causes others to experience joy. That, I think, helps us to see the joy the Buddha is talking about. So it's not our usual idea of joy, because what we might normally do when we hear something like that joy that I just described to you, that's abiding joy. That is all that stuff I was just talking about, right? You might go, oh, I got to get me some of that, because that's our usual way of thinking. That's our usual way of thinking. And the Buddha is not pointing to our usual way of thinking. But I think when you might tell yourself that joy is something I want, what we've done now is we've made something out of happiness. If you think about it, before it was just being not at odds with what's showing up. Right? There's really nothing to have there. But if we think of it as something to have, well, then we realize if we're not feeling happy, we're not feeling that joy, it's not here right now, right? So I got to go find it. There's that uneasiness. There's that restlessness that's showing up. And then when we do that, what we're doing in effect is what is, that whatever is here, we're rejecting it, looking for that happy joy, happy, happy joy, joy. And we're out looking for it, rejecting, not seeing what this is. But again, the joy the Buddha is discussing isn't something in particular, something that we can get, and then something that we might be able to use. Because that's another very common thing that we humans like to do. These things that we imagine, we want them to have some kind of use, especially if we're going to spend a lot of time with it. We better have some use to it. And if we hear the Buddhist phrase, let us live in joy, never hating those who hate us, let us live in freedom without hatred, even among those who hate, we might think, oh, well, if I live in that great joy, it's going to cause me, or it's going to allow me not to live without hatred. But joy is to live without hatred. Joy is to experience living without hatred. And we don't do that by saying, I'm never going to hate those who hate me. Instead, I will live without hatred, even among those who hate, right? So what the Buddha is pointing out to us, let us live in joy, never hating those who hate us. Let us live in freedom without hatred, even among those who hate. We don't do that by saying, well, yeah, now I'm never going to hate those who hate me, and I'm never going to live without hatred, even though I'm surrounded by hate. And the reason why we know that doesn't work is it sounds ridiculous. I think it does. It sounds Pollyannish. It sounds impossible for us, even while we're wishing that we could do something like that. But what we can do is we can see hatred for what it is. And that is a refusal to accept what is. And moreover, that refusal has an intoxicating, poisonous quality to it. Right? More so than a phrase of just a refusal to accept what is. Hatred has this other, you know what I mean, that kind of richness to it, a thickness to it. It's to identify something that's outside of us. To identify it that way, it's outside of us, outside of the way we think things should be. And then it's to fixate on that object that's outside of us. That's hatred. That's hatred. It can really occupy us. It can really occupy us. It's got a lot of juice to it. Now, there's something about this refusal to accept things are. When we're doing that, what we create is a binary way of understanding the world. This is good, this is bad, this is inside, this is outside, this is me, this is you. And that challenge that binary world poses for us is that we overlook how each term on either side of the binary is dependent on the other, completely dependent on the other. So there's no good without bad, no inside without outside, no me without you. And what that means is that when there's something that's good, right, that's the thing we accept. Inside, that was okay. That was not something that I hate, right? There's something that's good, The bad is right there in what is good. It has to be for us to understand it as good. So that's one challenge that the binary world presents for us. The other one is that the binary world also overlooks the provisional nature of each term of the binary. In other words, it makes each term on the binary a solid thing. We know what good is. We know what bad is. But a term like good is actually provisional. It's understandable only in certain circumstances. I think about something like, it's been hot and humid lately. And I don't know if you've been to those parks where they have mist, sprinkling, and you can walk through the mist to cool yourself down. And on a hot day, that's good. But now if it's minus 20, you probably wouldn't want to cool yourself off. Or in that mist, that is. Or if you were experiencing what I did when I was in Dutch Harbor, Alaska. Dutch Harbor, Alaska is halfway along the Aleutian Islands. So it's kind of out 900 miles from the mainland. And I had to get from my hotel to downtown Dutch Harbor, which was, there was no downtown Dutch. It was a Safeway there. So it was there. But to get from my hotel to anywhere else on this island, I had to walk through a mist, but it was fish vapor because I was staying next door to a fish processing plant. So, what's good sometimes, that mist, walking through the mist, other times maybe not so good. So there's this provisional nature of it. We also, again, in taking that we know what those terms to mean, good and bad, right or wrong, we miss out on the fact that we don't always know what we think we're talking about, right? So we think we know exactly what it is. When you start thinking in a binary way, you don't start to take into account the fact that you don't necessarily know. That if you really start peeling it apart, you're not sure. So I think about those terms, what the Buddha is talking about, living in a world of hate. He says, let us live in freedom without hatred, even among those who hate. We don't always know. Sometimes people will let us know that they hate. We don't always know that. They might let us know they hate us. We may not always know that. But I think for this teaching, that's not so important. Because if we look at what Buddha is pointing out to us, he's pointing toward living in a world without hatred. And there we can just watch our own minds and not hate. It's a world without hate. But when we live out of that binary world, the world where we're overlooking what's going on, then we get a strong sense of, and hatred arises from this. You can start to see the circular nature of it. We can get a strong sense of, the world doesn't feel like it's matching the way that I'm putting it together. So when we have those strong binaries, the world doesn't always meet them. In fact, if you're paying attention, it almost never does. It just doesn't do it. So we start to feel that the world doesn't line up with how we take it to be. And if we're paying attention, we can actually see that we're feeling the true nature of reality, right? That reality is that which isn't how we take it to be. We're actually feeling that. But if we're still caught up in that binary world, we often just mistake that feeling as, now we got to get this right. Now we got to understand what's going on here, because we feel uneasy and we feel we have to do something to patch over that uneasiness, and we go and try to take care of it. That's not how I take it to be. So this is the way we typically do it, right? It's not how I take it to be. So there must be something wrong with how it is. There's something wrong out there. It reminded me of the teaching by the great Chinese Zen teacher Huang Po. He said, the foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see. So while we're feeling something's off with our way that we put the world together, but then we start blaming it on the world, it's because we're caught up in what we think. We're not realizing what it is that we're actually seeing that's helping us to feel that something is off. And you see the circular nature of that, right? So we create that binary situation. We decide it's like this or it's like that. It's good or it's bad. It's right or it's wrong. It's this or it's that. Whatever it is. Fun, not fun, you know. And when we do that, the world doesn't match it. Kind of feel a sense of, oh, the world's not matching the way I'm putting the world together. But we don't think of it that. We just go, something's wrong. The world, I've got to change something out there. And the way I think of that is that circular nature is that what we're stepping onto is a misery go-round. We usually have a merry-go-round that kids like to ride. This is our misery go-round, right? We get confused. The world doesn't match our confusion. And then out of that confusion, we sow more confusion because we're going to try to make the world match our ideas about it rather than fit with the world, rather than be apt. Being what is, not being at odds with what is showing up, but just completely being here in such a way that there's not something poking out over it or laying on top of it. That is what our meditation practice is. That's Zazen. That is Zazen. That is shikantaza, to use a fancier term, right? That is to just sit when you sit, to just sit. And when you eat, to just eat. It is when you dance, to just dance. When you pet your cat, it's just to pet your cat, right? And I probably say that because there was a teacher here who still is one of the great meditation instruction. This guy lives in northern Wisconsin now. But one of his instructions as he was teaching this wholehearted living, just of whatever it is we're doing to do this. He said, just pet your damn cat. Just pet your damn cat. So just pet your cat. That is Zen. That is our practice. And that is how we can see the hatred for what it is. Again, it's this way of constructing the world, but we can only do that if we really see what's going on. If we really just settle into this right now. Does that mean we don't have ideas? No, it doesn't. But it's to see when we're having ideas, when we have thoughts, when anger arises in us, when hatred arises within us. To not get swept away by it, but to see how hatred is showing up right now. To really feel that, but not do what we normally do. What we normally do is as soon as that thing seems to hit us, we're like a ball firing off and acting out of it, trying to make the world conform to something, trying to make the world stop making us hate or hurt or whatever it might be. So that's what we usually do, as opposed to just being this. And we may need to do something to take care of a situation. So again, this isn't about not doing something, but it's about not thinking of it as we're like a cue ball, or we're like the 8-ball that just got hit by the cue ball. And now we're going to careen into the pocket before we're supposed to, because the 8-ball is supposed to go in last. I don't know, it's a pretty goofy metaphor, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's to actually not just allow ourselves to get carried away. It's to be fully present with this. To wholeheartedly live this. And that's not always easy for us to do, because sometimes it hurts. And the way that hurt might show up, I know it does for me, is, well, I don't go through this monologue, but I'll give it, it's like, I don't want it to be like this. I don't want it to be like this. So then I think about, well, what can I do to make it not be like this? And I'll do something to make it not be like this. And that could include, I'm having a conversation with somebody and the conversation starts to go south, right? It's just something starts happening. And then you try to correct the way the conversation is going. This happened in a conversation I had once. It's probably happened more than once, but once it was very lively. And I thought, oh no, the person's getting upset. I have to do something to make them not upset. So I thought if I explained the situation more thoroughly, then they wouldn't be so upset. But the more I explained it, the more upset the person got. And then I was like going, oh yeah. And I realized after it was all done, and I finally said something I wish I hadn't, because I was starting to get angry, just like that person was, that I was doing all of this because I was uncomfortable. And yet when I was doing it, I thought I was doing it because the other person seemed upset and I wanted to calm them. I wanted to calm them down, but I wanted to calm them down because it was making me feel uneasy, right? So again, that's the way we usually are. We can just kind of see, I can be a little more easily now, just be with that kind of energy. You know, I may inside want to respond. I can just sit and not do it if that's appropriate. So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not saying every time you feel angry, don't respond. Do what's appropriate. That's actually Zen teaching. That's that happiness, that aptness. It's what is appropriate. Now, what we do is we go, well, how do I know it's appropriate or not appropriate, right? Isn't that the question then? But do we see that that's that binary world again? There's appropriate and there's not appropriate. And then we sit there and we go, well, which one's appropriate? And then you sit and you tug your hair out of that. Zazen. Bring yourself back and just take the next step. Do the next thing. And then something else is going to come up. Do the next thing. Something else is going to come up. Do the next thing. But do it wholeheartedly. Just pet your cat. Just do that. Pet your damn cat, right? And there, in Zazen, that's when our conceptions, our aversions, our desires drop off. Right? Doesn't mean they're not going to show up, but they don't grab us, and we don't have to try wrestling them to the ground. And there, in that, is joy. And this is what the Buddha was pointing to, because notice he has that word freedom in there as well. Because when you do this, you start to realize now you're no longer bound by your contract to your ideas about right and wrong or what to do or what you shouldn't do. It's very freeing. Again, it doesn't mean we don't have difficult choices to make in life. We do. That's life, but we can do that with a sense of freedom and wholeheartedness, or we can get kind of knotted up with it. So again, what the Buddha is telling us, he says, let us live in joy. This is what he's telling us. Let us do this. What the heck? It's an invitation. Let us live in joy. Never hating those who hate. That is joy. Never hating those who hate. That's that aptness. That's that felicitousness right there. Let us live in freedom, not bound by our ideas. We're never really bound by them, but boy, do we make it seem like it. It's really hard for us if we have convictions to see them just as they are. Doesn't mean to throw your convictions away, but to see the convictions for what they are. Let us live in freedom without hatred, even among those who hate, because that will be our go-to. But those people hate, do you know what I mean? And we can do something to respond to hatred. But if we go back to the beginning of the Dhammapada, Buddha tells us that it's not by hatred that hatred ceases. That's one of the first verses of the Dhammapada. It's not by hatred that hatred ceases. And then depending on the translation, it's by not hating that hatred ceases, or the one that you hear more commonly and that gives non-hatred a little bit more juice. It's by love that hatred ceases. That's this joy. That's this joy. All right, and that is my talk. So I don't know if people have questions or comments about the talk, or if there's just something you'd like to discuss this morning. But I will open the floor to you, and I'm going to have Brian pass this microphone around so that people on Zoom can.
Thank you for the talk. I have a hard time with not wanting something, feeling wrong about the way something is in the world. like that makes me an actor rather than passive in my mind. So I think minimum wage should be higher. I'm feeling disconnected from someone I love. Isn't it good that I want to change that? Or what does it look like if I'm feeling joy while wanting that to be different? What does it look like to be in joy while also wanting that to be different?
Yeah, well, Brian, we're really gonna make you work out. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. People will ask that because it sounds like what this practice is saying is don't do anything, basically. Don't want, don't desire. But it's not that. We're humans, we live in this world. Stuff shows up. We might not like the way things are showing up. But what we can do is not get hung up on that desire. And what I mean by that is, let's say you can't change whatever it is you're thinking you could change, right? That will devastate people, will make people angry, it'll cause people to sink into hatred. And regardless of whether, one perhaps thinks a situation is not right and maybe you need to do something with it. Again, that's the world we live in, right? There is ideas of right and wrong that we have to deal with, but they are ideas. That's the thing we have to keep in mind. So our ideas of right and wrong may not be somebody else's ideas of right and wrong. And so when we're going in trying to fiddle around and make things right, it might not be right for that other person. Like when I was having that conversation, and I thought if I just explain this, it'll make it better. Well, it wasn't. The explanation was actually causing more harm, right? So yeah, we live in a world where, like you said, that's how the world shows up, and yeah, do things. If you see something and it seems wrong to you, if it seems like somebody's wronging another, right? Well, do something. I'm not sure what that looks like, but do something. But can we do it without hatred? Can we do it? And let's face it, I think we can see this in a lot of discourse or social discourse right now, is that it's not just that we see a wrong that we think needs to be righted. Then we want to condemn people that maybe we think are holding wrong views. And maybe we do more than condemn them in our hearts. We know that they're wrong, and we start to get a kind of inculcate a little bit of that poison I was talking about. So it's actually just to notice, hey, I don't want things to be the way they are. Well, why not? Right? What is it you want? Is it about you? Is it about some idea that you have of the world that you think everybody else should share? And again, is that right or wrong? That's not how Buddhism works, So Buddhism is not going to tell you don't do that. It's going to sound like it says that, but often it's just saying don't do that. It's that doing that is nothing doing, right? So it's just being aware with whatever, it's trying to be wholly present with what's showing up and knowing that we're acting out of our ideas about what's going on. So when we're start stepping forward, when we do that, it potentially will get messy necessarily, but it could. And it might be that we have to realize that's why, because we're operating in a situation right now where whatever we think we're doing that's the right thing to do may not be the right thing to do. And there are all kinds of reasons for that. I'll give you a real quick example. I worked at a paper mill for a summer. Where I grew up, that was sort of the industry. It's not there any longer, and it was a good way to make money for college. And at one point, my job was I was what was called a broke hustler. And what that meant is I sat around and got bored all day long, except for one of these giant machines that would take pulp and turn pulp into paper. So they're basically just giant dryers that were about a city block long. And then as far as the width go, maybe about a third of a block wide, and they had these, so it was hot in that room. And my job was when the machine broke, I had to get the paper that was spilling out of the middle of the machine out of the way so that the guys could fix the machines. That's what a broke hustler is. I was hustling broke, and I would stuff it in a little slot in the floor. And anyhow, I'm telling you all of this because one day I was going to do my job, hustle some broke, and this guy just like grabbed me and he pulled me away. with what seemed like vigor that was beyond what the situation. I had no idea that was my job. And I said, I gotta, and he pointed up at, there were these like ropes. They weren't like ropes, they were ropes that would snake through the machines. And what they would use those ropes for is when a machine broke, they would throw the paper to at one of those ropes and it would actually thread the paper back through the machine again. So when the paper broke, they would need to get it back through the whole machine. They would do that by throwing it at this rope. Just kind of toss it at the rope, a little piece of paper about that line, and it would go through. But it was shaking, like wobbling really bad. I didn't know what that meant. And then the guy was really even more dramatic. He goes, see this? And he pulled his shirt down and he had this scar on his shoulder right up here. And he goes, I got that because one of those ropes snapped and a whip, and he was like being whipped with iron, and I just went, okay, you might have just, I don't know. But there was a reason I was telling you that. Oh, okay, I just didn't know what was going on. So my initial reaction to that was anger when that guy grabbed me. I was trying to do my job. And this guy not only tried to stop me, but he did it in such a fashion that it made me angry. So there I wasn't sure what was going on until it was explained to me. And then I understood. So it was really I was looking at my mind. I don't know what was going through that guy. I think he was just trying to protect me. Like, I was a college boy, so to them, I was an idiot. So he was just pulling the child out from stepping out in front of the oncoming traffic, I think. But I didn't know that. So that's what happens a lot is we have ideas about what's going on and not everybody really knows what we're doing. And in that case, it was something I agreed with, but there you go. You can even be in alignment with somebody, but if you're taking that step forward and you're doing it in a certain way, they may not know what's going on and they might struggle with you. How often have you had an argument with somebody who agrees with you? Like you're arguing and you're arguing and you're arguing, and at some point you realize you're actually both saying the same thing, but it took you a while to get there. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. Thank you. That was a long answer, though. I apologize for that. Once I get going into those memories of working in the paper mill. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah, I tamped that down a little bit. Sorry about that. Yeah, David.
Perhaps you could say something more about being with people who hate you.
Can you elaborate on that?
With people who actually hate you.
When you say, can you say more about it?
Well, here I am, and I'm wanting to be joyful, and this person hates me. What else? What else do you need to know?
Well, I guess I'm asking what you're asking, but I think you're asking, what do I do?
Yeah.
Well, you know the koan. I mean, so this is the difficulty is that is hard. What he's describing is exactly why I said you can't just tell yourself when you're approaching this teaching. Let's see here. I'm never gonna, I'm never gonna hate those who hate me, Instead, I will live without hatred, even among those who hate, right? That's kind of the way I'm hearing that it's playing out for you, in that that's impossible, or it's really difficult. So what do I do? And again, it is. I think of I'm a cite a movie that I've cited often here at Dharma Field, and it's bringing us back to pool balls again, oddly enough. But there was a movie where a guy, innocent Italian guy, well, seemingly innocent Italian guy, gets thrown in jail with a couple guys who don't look so innocent. And they're decrying their innocence. The two guys that are already in jail, they're, Americans, white guys. And this Italian guy comes in and they, he asks, the Italian guy asks him, how come you're in jail? And then they're like, I got framed for this. I got framed for that. I didn't do it. I'm innocent. And then one of them goes, oh, what did you do? And he goes, I killed somebody. And then they kind of inch away from him. And then he explains that he'd been in a card game and he'd cheated and they caught him cheating. So they chased him and he ran out into this pool room. And then the guys started picking up pool balls and they were throwing them at him. And he said, when you throw pool balls at me, I throw pool balls at you, right? So he threw the pool ball back. And that's all a long way to say, when hatred and anger is being directed at us, it's really hard for us not to direct that right back out, right? I know that's hard. And if that's what's going on, that's what you have to deal with next. So for that guy, Bob was the Italian guy's name. Bob ended up in jail. That's the next thing that happened. Then what happened next? Well, in that movie anyhow, they bust out of jail. And then what happens next? Well, then he meets, of all things, an Italian woman living in the Louisiana bayou, and he falls in love with her. He stays with her while his prison mates go on to have misadventures, more misadventures. But that's it, you know, if you throw the hatred back, that's what just happened now. And now you've got that to deal with. So there is no right or wrong thing to do. It's just, if that's what you're going to do, you throw a pool ball at me, I throw a pool ball at you. Well, if you start throwing the pool balls, they're going to come back at you, you know, probably more than likely. And then you're going to have to deal with that. So, but if we're practicing Zazen, right, that feeling of hatred can rise up. It's possible we won't throw the pool ball back. You know, I'm not saying you have to throw the pool ball back. I'm just saying that's what we tend to do. You know, so it is difficult. There is no answer I can give you, because what you do is what you do. And then you got to deal with that. That's the next thing that you do. You have to accept what you've just done. You have to. Or if you don't, you know, more misadventure arises. Roger, do you have a comment?
It's not a perfect fit, but I want to talk about related to you're talking about hate. I want to talk about a book I'm reading right now. It's a biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And he was from a wealthy family and he had many talents. And he lives in Germany as Hitler is coming to power. And so Hitler quickly is showing his true colors. So Bonhoeffer is a Lutheran minister. And so he has to decide exactly what he is going to do. So he could have been caught up in hate, or he could have done one thing or another, but what he decided to do was join an organization that was secretly opposing. So they were not making bombs, but they were trying to figure out how, as people, to gather Germans to stand up, have some backbone, and oppose Hitler, because almost nobody did, including almost all Catholic priests and almost all Lutheran ministers showed cowardice. So Dietrich decides to just work with a group that's growing larger and larger. And meanwhile, Hitler has also said the idea of God was ridiculous, and he didn't want anybody to talk about God. So Dietrich just continued to help this organization using some wealth and contacts, and continued to give talks about Christian love and so on. So eventually he was warned, your name is now on a list, and soon you will be, they're going to gather you up. And so, but he just, again, he never became violent or anything. He just kept doing what he was doing. And so one day the black car came and picked him up. And actually, he was invited once he was in prison because he was from a very important, powerful family. He was invited to just sort of shut up. And but he kept on making trouble. Some of the guards helped him, and he just kept on making trouble, sending messages out. So he just kept doing what he was doing. And so the day came and they took him off, and eventually he was taken to a concentration camp and shot. So his attitude right to the end was, well, I'm doing my job. And, it was almost telling the soldiers, I did my job, go ahead and do your job. He just kept, so that's, I would say he was a famous person. Now, many books have been written about him, who did not turn his life into hate or any kind of attempt to kill anybody. He just kept on his point of view.
Thank you.